Okay, so for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Stephanie Stevens. And I guess you could say this story started back in August of 2012, because that's where my story kind of started. I was a mother of a medically fragile child, and his name was Isaac, and he suddenly passed away. And in a mother's grief, I was crying out to the Lord, and I was screaming, and I was saying, I'm 35 years old. I have no husband. My only son is dead. What do I do now? And I heard a voice in my head that said, seek the kingdom of God. I had no idea that was a Bible verse at the time. But my response was, where do I go? Because I hadn't been in church in years at that time. And he led me to New Covenant Church. And from there, I rededicated my life to the Lord, because I got saved when I was 9, okay? Like, when I was 10 years old, Wednesday night was the place, church was the place to be on a Wednesday night. But by the time I was 22, it was ladies' night at the club. And I'll let y'all fill in the rest of that. It's good to be back in the house on a Wednesday night. Amen. Yes. But I rededicated my life to the Lord. And New Covenant has a singles ministry that on Friday nights, and I was going because I went from this mother of a medically fragile child who her schedule was full and was all about caring for her son, to suddenly I was sitting on my couch in silence and wondering what to do with my life. And so I was going to everything I possibly could to fill the voids. And so I was going to the singles ministry. And from there, I learned about Jesus Burger. And January of 2013, I went, not because there was a special calling on my life, but simply because I needed a reason to get up out of bed. And it became a place of healing, because I don't know, it was like it gave me new purpose. Where my purpose was Isaac's mom, suddenly I had new people to love, and new, just, it was all things new, and it was incredible. And so I've been out there for 9 years, and I don't know, it's like that's my family, that's my home. And in being here tonight, I'm super nervous. This is my first time to ever give a message. So I'm super nervous, but at the same time, I know I'm among family. And so I've been out there 9 years, but at the beginning of this year, the Lord spoke to me, and he said to me that I've become too busy, and he wanted to see less doing and more seeking him. And I've read the Bible a few times. I read it in 2020, but I didn't read it in 2021. And so one of the ways I wanted to seek him was I was going to read the Bible from front to the back again. The only problem is that I lost my Bible. It went missing at Jesus Burger again. It never got recovered. Doesn't have my name on it, but it's a Bible, and it's got a bunch of cool verses highlighted in it. So if anybody ever finds it, you're welcome. And I have this like calendar at my house that I drew up in 2020 of I'll read 4 chapters every day, and by mid-November I'll be done reading the Bible. And so I lost my Bible, and it wasn't until January 12th till I bought my new one that's purple and pretty and has my name on it in case I lose it. I'll know where to give it to. It was January 12th, and so what I was trying to do was trying to play catch up and read as much of the Bible as I could to get back on my schedule. And the Lord spoke to me, and he was like, no. Slow it down. I want you to slow it down, and I want you to find me in the scriptures. And it's become my favorite time of the day, because he's literally, it's the same Bible, but it's like I'm reading something totally new. And Genesis, of course, that's the first book, and that's where I started. And it's got all those really cool stories, you know, the Abraham and Sarah story, the love story of Rachel and Jacob. And what we're going to talk about tonight starts in Genesis 37. And when I got to Genesis 37, I got really excited because that's the story of Joseph. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with his story, but I love it. Okay, he was the guy who had the coat of many colors, and his brothers threw him in a pit. And we all have this celebration of how he went from the pit to the prison to the palace, and we all love his story because he had all these wild dreams, and in spite of all these bad things that happened to him, he was still raised to see those dreams come to fruition. And it's just an exciting story, and it's wonderful. And this time when I started reading Genesis 37, God showed me the bad guy in Joseph's story. He showed me Judah. And you see, Judah is one of Joseph's brothers. And the story here in chapter 37, it starts out, Jacob loves Joseph more than everybody else, and so everybody's jealous of him and they hate him. And Joseph doesn't really help matters because he's having all these dreams, and he's implying that someday they're going to bow down to him, and he was all that, and they just kind of hated him all the more. And we know, if you've ever gone through Joseph's story, you know that he went through a process that had to prepare him for the calling that was on his life. And the thing is young Joseph, when he was having all these dreams about being raised up and people bowing down to him, he didn't understand that when you're being raised up to a position, it's not so that people can bow down to you. It's so that you can take care of the people that God has placed you over. Now, when you fast forward in Joseph's story and you get toward the end of it, you have this really cool verse. It's one of my favorite life verses. And we see that his process that he went through, the pit, the prison, the palace, we see that he finally realized it's not about him, and it was about others, because in Genesis 50:20, he says, what you meant for evil, God worked for my good and for the saving of many. He finally realized it wasn't about me, it was about other people. And so that's just an incredible story. So I'm like, okay, God, why are you talking to me about Judah? And he said, you're Judah. All this time, I was always thinking that I was the Joseph in the story. But this time, God took me to a place where he had to check me on some things. As you see, in chapter 37, starts in verse 12, it says, then his brothers went to feed their father's flock. And if you've been serving anywhere, whether it's Jesus Burger, Kids Ministry, wherever you're at, if you're serving the Lord, you are feeding his flock. All right? And so there the brothers are. They're serving their father. They're out there in the field. And like I see this, I can imagine it when God took me to that place. It's like, you know, Jesus Burger in August when it hasn't rained. It's like 115 degrees and you're hot and you're miserable, but you love everybody, so you're out there. But at the same time, they're not being recognized. They're not being celebrated. But Joseph over here is getting this coat of many colors, and he's bragging about all these dreams that the Lord is giving him. And you're over here in the heat feeding the flock. And Judah got some jealousy in him. And God took me to a place where he showed me there have been times where you were serving, but you were jealous of what I was doing in somebody else's life. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that felt that. And something that God showed me, though, is that although Joseph had an amazing calling on his life and had an amazing vision for his life, and Judah wasn't getting anything at that time, doesn't mean that God didn't have an amazing appointment for Judah. And what he also showed me between the two boys, two brothers, okay, we all know Joseph's process prepared him for destiny. But what he showed me with Judah feeding his father's flock is that serving doesn't entitle us to a blessing. Serving may prepare us, as we see in Joseph, but it doesn't entitle us. And God had to check me on that. And I'd rather share it with you and let you check yourself. And then, it's easier when we humble ourselves than have to let other people do that. Or the Lord do it for us. It's just better if we do it ourselves. So he wanted me to encourage you that it doesn't mean that you don't have anything coming. It might not be in front of your face, but go ahead. It's okay to celebrate. We don't have to be envious of our brothers. And actually, he also showed me that envy and jealousy is the indication that we too need to go through a process, because we are not ready for what he has for us when we have that. And he started showing me that it's like baking a cake, all right? You put in all these ingredients, egg and flour and vanilla and sugar and all that good stuff, and you mix it up and you put it in an oven. And God was like, and that's what I do with you. I put you in a bowl with gifts and talents, callings, destiny, and I mix it up. And I put it in an oven, a process of time. And what he was showing me is with a cake, when you're trying to check to see if it's done, you poke it with a knife. If it comes out gross, it's not done. And he showed me, his example was, he'll poke at us, and if it comes out gross, we're not done. True story. That's how he teaches me. And so moving on in the story, all right, the boys are out there in the field. Joseph comes, and they have this plot. They're going to kill him. Like, they are so jealous of him. They decide they're going to kill him. And one of them's like, no, put him in a pit, because he's thinking he's going to rescue him later on. So they put him in this pit, and then the Ishmaelites come, and then I got to read it so you'll see it. I'm going to have to get glasses, y'all. Okay. I honestly thought I had it marked. Okay. Verse 37:26 reads, So Judah said to his brothers, What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened. Now, something we need to get, all right, is we will justify our sin by making it less than something else, okay? Selling your brother into slavery is not okay. Killing him wasn't okay either. But Judah was justifying that it was okay to sell him because he wasn't killing him. The other disturbing thing in this is his brothers listened. All right, honestly, if we were good brothers, we would be like, dude, that's a bad idea. Let's not do that. But they went with them. So they sell Joseph into slavery. They take his coat of many colors. They dip it in some blood. They show it to their father, and they're like, does this belong to your son? And I don't know if Judah had thought his plan out very far. But not only did he sell his brother into slavery, but he broke his father's heart by doing it. Because now his father no longer has his son, and his heart is broken. And it says in here that they tried to comfort him, and he could not be comforted. And I'm like, how did you think he was going to respond? Like, did you think he'd be like, oh, and just keep going? No. Losing your child ain't fun. But they broke his father's heart. And when we do wrong by our brother, we break our father's heart too. In chapter 38, they tried to comfort. There's a lot of J's in this. They tried to comfort Jacob, but they couldn't. Joseph's been sold. He's in Egypt now to Potiphar's house. And in chapter 38, the first part, it says, "And it came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers." Now, I don't know about y'all, but have you ever been the bad guy in the situation? And it just seems like suddenly, even though everybody else went along with you with the plan, now they're all mad at you. And it's your fault. And instead of trying to own up and trying to fix it, you just throw up your hands and you walk out and you do your own thing. And I believe that I see that is what Judah just did. He just up and he left. In chapter 38, it goes on to talk about how he gets married and he starts having children of his own. He had 3 sons, and the first one's name was but he died. It said that he was evil, and so the Lord killed him. And when I was reading that, I'm like, well, Judah sold a brother into slavery, and he was not killed, but this guy was considered evil, and God killed him. I was like, whoa, what on earth did he do? But before he died, he had been given a wife named Tamar, and they didn't have any kids. And so after he died, Judah tells his second son, sleep with your brother's wife and give him an heir, because that's what they did at the time. And the PG-13 of this, he did the deed, but he spilt his seed. And the Lord, if you don't know what that means, ask your mom when you get home. But the Lord, that displeased the Lord, and so he died. And so here we are. Judah has not lost just one son, but he has gone through it twice. And the Lord starts speaking to me, and some people will say that this is karma. But what God started showing me is this is process at work in this man. He is learning through suffering. He is learning compassion. He's now really, truly seeing the hurt that his father went through. And the woman Tamar, I'm just going to read this to y'all because this is where it gets weird. So I'm going to read this story. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown." By the way, y'all, I do not know how to pronounce the Bible names. So if I pronounce them wrong, forgive me. I'll pronounce them the way they look. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Now, in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers in Timnah, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which was on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, because she had covered her face. And then he turned to her by the way and said, "Please let me come in to you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" And he said, "I will send you a goat from the flock." So she said, "Will you give me a pledge till you send it?" And then he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" So she said, "Your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand." Then he gave them to her, and he went into her, and she conceived by him. That's loaded. All right. If y'all didn't understand that, ask your mom what just happened when you get to the house. I do not know how she figured that plan was going to work, unless she had already seen him with harlots before. I don't know, but I have to wonder. But there she is. She's pregnant. He goes back. He sends his friend with a goat to give to the harlot, but by this time she done left, done put on her widow's clothes, went on about her business. Nobody knows who this harlot is they're looking at. And he's like, "Oh, well, let her keep the stuff. No sense in chasing her around and embarrassing ourselves." And so he went, and that's the short end of it. So then I'm going to start back in verse 38:24. says, and it came to pass about 3 months after that Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. And so Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. And what God showed me in this is this man wants her burned alive for the very thing that he did. And God showed me that there's a lot, we are guilty of that. He showed me that. And it says, when she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, please determine who these are, the signet and cord and staff. Busted. Whoa. If y'all didn't know that was in the Bible, you're welcome. All right. So this is a pivotal moment, all right? When I read that, I instantly was reminded of the time whenever Judah and his brothers had showed the coat of many colors to his father. Does this belong to your son? And I wonder if at that moment, Judah went back to that moment as well. Because something changed in him in this moment. The next verse reads, so Judah acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah, my son. And he never knew her again. Now y'all ever heard that story of when the religious leaders brought the adulterous woman to Jesus? And he gives that famous line, who is without sin, you throw the first stone. I can't help but wonder when he was drawing in the sand if he did not remember Judah and Tamar. Because this man went straight from ready to burn her to stopping in his tracks, and he stopped looking at her sin and he started owning his own stuff. I'm not talking about the signet and the cord and the staff. I'm talking about his sin. He owned that. He stopped looking at her. He started owning his own stuff. And then that last line, and he never knew her again. Something changed in his heart. Your actions show what's going on in your heart. When your heart repents, your actions change. And what is amazing in this place where we're at, he could have lied, he could have denied, he could have had her burned in silence and just kept going on with his life, but instead he owned up. And then it said he never knew her again, which that he could have said, well, I've done did it, so I might as well keep on. But he didn't. He stopped. That's what repentance looks like. Now here's where we get a happy part in this story. Now it came to pass at the time for giving birth that, behold, twins were in her womb. And I want you to see this. Because of evil, he done lost 2 sons. But now, because he chose to own up to his mess, he was given the opportunity of 2 sons being restored to him. Had he not owned up and burned her alive, he would not have gotten these 2 sons. And so it was when she was giving birth that one pulled out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But then it happened. He drew back his hand, and then his brother came out unexpectedly, and she said, how did you break through? This breach be upon you. Therefore his name was called Perez, because Perez means breakthrough. And what God showed me in this was not only the 2 sons lost being restored, but breakthrough was being born. Also, what God also showed me in this is breakthrough was conceived in just a really jacked up situation. His brother thought his mom was a harlot when really it was his daughter-in-law. And that's kind of bizarre. But what God showed me is that this, of all of Jacob's grandsons, this is the one that would carry the bloodline down to the biblical heroes such as Boaz, King David, Solomon, all the way down to Jesus Christ. He took the mess and brought the Messiah. And also, I really felt like the Lord gave this to me to share. I feel like this is his heart. But we often know and we often recognize that God brings beauty from ashes. We know that God works out all things together for the good. And what he showed me, that maybe if you were conceived in jacked up situations, there are children, they're product of rape, or their parents, it was in sin, or whatever, God has showed me. He said, if that was you, you were the good thing that he brought from it. And he wants you to know that. So remember the story of Perez, a.k.a. Baby Breakthrough. I know, right? All right. So part 3 of this story, we're going to fast forward. At this place in time, let's go back some. I should have followed notes. I should have had better notes maybe. But at this time, let's go back and let's talk about Abraham. Abraham was promised that he was going to become a great nation, and kings were going to be birthed out of him. And here Israel had 12 sons, but now we're down to 11 because 10 of them sold one into slavery, and the promise isn't looking very promising right now, okay? And so it's just a mess. But when we fast forward, we're about to see how God takes that mess and brings it back together. So, find where I'm at in my... Okay. We're going to fast forward from Genesis 38 to Genesis 42. Joseph has already risen to power. He's second in command. There's a famine in the land, and Egypt is the only place that's got food. And Jacob learns of it, and he's tells his sons, go to Egypt and get us some food. And when they get there, and I'm sure y'all are all familiar with this story, they encounter Joseph, but they don't know it's Joseph. And Joseph is being a jerk to them right now. I mean, he didn't kill them, but he's being mean and, oh, you're spies, and accusing them and talking all crazy, and they're all freaking out. And what Joseph does is he wants to throw them all in prison except one to go get the little brother. But then he says, wait, no, I fear the Lord. Y'all go, I'll keep one brother, and the rest of y'all can go, but don't come back without the little brother. I sense where Joseph was wanting to reconnect with his little brother. I also sense that the one brother that got left in prison was still needing to go through some process, obviously. Well, when they get back to the house and they tell their dad about everything that happened, he was like, why did you tell him that I was here and that you had a brother? Why? Because what he didn't want to do is have to let Benjamin go to Egypt. What is so special about Benjamin is that if you go back, Jacob had 2 wives, one he loved and one he didn't. Joseph was the first son of the wife that he loved, and Benjamin was the second son, and she died while giving birth to him. With Joseph being no more, because Jacob believes he's dead, it makes him extra clingy toward Benjamin. He doesn't want anything to happen to him because this is all that he has left of the woman that he loved. But now, in order for him to get food, he has to let go of this kid and let them take him to Egypt. So they return to Egypt. They've got Benjamin. They return. They get their other brother back, and they're all headed back home with their sack of food. This is the short version of the story. But Joseph has set them up. He hid a cup in Benjamin's sack of food, and then he told his people, go get them. They've stolen from me. So when they get pulled over, they're like, we ain't told. We We don't have nothing of yours. We're innocent. Look, whoever it is who's got your cup, you can kill him, and the rest of us are going to be your slaves. And some wisdom here: do not make promises that you do not want to keep. Okay, there's some free stuff for you. But they find the cup in Benjamin's bag. And they all tore their clothes, and they were like, oh no. Oh, like that was the worst thing that could have happened at this point. So they all go back to Egypt, and it shows where they're bowing down before Joseph. And Joseph's like, I don't want all of y'all to be my slave, just the one who's had my cup. That's the only one. Well, that's Benjamin. That's the one that they were all like, we can't let nothing happen to this kid. And so what ends up happening is Judah stands up. And he starts to talk to Joseph, and he's like, look, man, this is the East Texas version of it. We came up here with food. You asked us if we had a brother. We said yes, this is who he is. He's the last of his mother's sons. The other one is no more, and his father loves him. And we promised that we wouldn't let nothing happen to him. And I'll read it from it, chapter 44, starting in 32. He says, for your servant, and Judah's talking about himself, he said, became surety for the lad, that is Benjamin, to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father forever. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. And I want you to see this. The same guy in Genesis 37 who sold a brother is now in chapter 44 saying, let me be the slave instead of my brother. I want y'all to see that this man went from acting like a Judas, to looking like Jesus, because he cared more about his father's heart than he did his own life, and he cared more about his brother than his own self. And is that not the goal? Is that not the process? I think that is where God took Judah out of the oven and stuck something in him, and it came out clean. He was like, he's done. He's ready. And in chapter 45, which is the next part, says, then Joseph could not restrain himself before all who stood by him, and he cried out. It was at that moment where he stopped playing his games. When he saw Judah's heart, he stopped playing his games. Instead of just wanting connection with Benjamin, he revealed who he was, and he allowed the rest of them to come to Egypt. He invited them to come and set up. And if it was not for the humility and the bravery of Judah and the forgiveness of Joseph, if it was not for the posture of their hearts being in the right place at that time, would we have even had 12 tribes of Israel? You see how huge that was? But because of one's humility and one's forgiveness, a family that was jacked up and broken was reunited and restored. It's huge, and it matters because of what those two did, because of the restoration that took place in that family, okay, that impacted the world. And then finally, this is my final thing that God showed me, that this rocked my world. We all get caught up how Joseph was second in position. We all get caught up on that. We all want that. We want to be the lead singer of the band. We want to be the it person. But God showed me that we don't call Jesus the Lion of Joseph. We call him the Lion of Judah. The bloodline went through, of all the 12 tribes, it went through the brother that humbled himself and said, make me the slave. And so, friends, I want you to find yourself in this story. You know, God showed me, take your eye off position and selfish ambition, humble yourself, because Joseph had an amazing calling. He saved nations, but Judah, because he humbled himself into servanthood, he impacted generations. It was through his line that we have Jesus Christ, our Savior. So literally, where we are today, where we are tonight, had it not have been for Judah and his humility in that place, would we have even be here? Oh, that's all I had to share. That was what was on my heart.